Hello, students, and welcome. Okay, let's just jump right into it. In today's explainer, we are going to tackle biology's ultimate survival strategy and decode the absolute secret to life on Earth. We're diving into Class 10 Science, Chapter 8, and specifically focusing on this massive, fundamental question. How do organisms reproduce?
So let me ask you a really big, kinda existential question. Have you ever just looked out the window and wondered, why doesn't life on Earth just end? I mean, think about it. How do bacteria multiply overnight to turn milk into curd? How are new plants and animals being born every single day? And why on earth do children look so much like their parents? Well, the answer to all of those mysteries actually boils down to one incredibly powerful life process.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to cover 1. The secret to life's continuity. 2. What exactly is reproduction? 3. Asexual reproduction, solo survival. 4. Sexual reproduction, the partnership. 5. The great biological divide. And finally, 6. A board exam quick revision.
All right, Section 1. The secret to life's continuity.
Moving right along to Section 2. What exactly is reproduction? Let's define it.
Basically, reproduction is the biological process where living organisms produce new individuals, which, we call offspring, of their own species. It's pretty straightforward, right? Whether it's a giant mango tree dropping seeds that sprout into new plants, a cat having a litter of kittens, or a hen hatching cute little chicks, it is simply life creating more life. But here's a wild thought for you. There is a huge distinction between an individual and a species. Think about this. A single individual organism doesn't actually need to reproduce to stay alive. A human, a dog, a tree, they can all live full, perfectly healthy lives without ever having a single offspring. But a species as a whole, it absolutely must reproduce. If it doesn't, it faces total extinction. Reproduction is what maintains the continuity of a species over generations, it bumps up the population, it transfers vital genetic information from parents to offspring, and, super importantly, it introduces variations that help organisms adapt and evolve over time.
Section 3. Asexual reproduction, solo survival.
So how do organisms actually pull this off? Well, biology basically has two main game plans, and the first one is what I like to call the solo path, asexual reproduction. This process relies entirely on just one parent. It's a method where that single parent produces offspring without the fusion of male and female gametes. And because literally all the genetic material comes from just one single source, the offspring are perfectly identical copies of the parent. We formally call these identical copies clones.
Now, there are some massive advantages to doing things solo. It is an incredibly fast, highly efficient process. It's heavily favored by bacteria, fungi, algae, and some plants. Why? Well, because it only requires one parent. They don't have to waste any time or energy trying to find a mate. It takes way less energy overall, and it allows for a massive number of offspring to be produced in a very short amount of time. Honestly, if you want to conquer a new environment quickly, this is exactly the way to do it.
However, you knew a but was coming, right? The biological trade-off here is a very risky bet. Because the offspring are identical clones, there is absolutely zero genetic variation. That means they have much less ability to adapt to changing environments. If a sudden temperature shift happens, or if a specific disease targets that exact genetic code, the entire identical population could be wiped out in an instant. They share all the same strengths, sure, but they also share all the exact same weaknesses.
Section 4. Sexual reproduction, the partnership.
Because of those catastrophic risks associated with just cloning yourself, many organisms, and this includes humans, birds, mammals, and flowering plants, they evolved a completely different path. This is sexual reproduction, and this one requires a partnership. It's the process where male and female gametes fuse together, an event we call fertilization, to form a brand new individual. By bringing together genetic material from two completely different parents, the resulting offspring is entirely unique.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that sexual reproduction introduces genetic variation. This variation kind of acts like an invisible evolutionary shield. Since every offspring is slightly different, a single disease or an environmental change is highly unlikely to wipe out everyone. Some individuals will naturally have traits that just help them survive the change. This variation helps the species adapt to shifting environments, which ultimately increases their overall chances of survival and drives the long-term process of evolution.
But biology is always about balance, right? The downside of this brilliant evolutionary shield is the immense cost. It requires two parents, meaning organisms have to spend precious time and resources just finding and attracting a mate. It's a much slower process, takes vastly more energy, and ultimately yields significantly fewer offspring compared to the rapid-fire multiplication of the solo asexual route.
Let's look at how this builds mechanically. I've used the word gametes a few times now. Gametes are simply the specialized reproductive cells that are contributed by each parent. The male gamete is called the sperm, and the female gamete is called the egg or ovum.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the linear progression of life. Step 1, the male and female gametes fuse together in that amazing process called fertilization. Step 2, this fusion creates a single, incredibly powerful cell called a zygote. And then step 3, that zygote divides, grows, and eventually develops into a whole new organism. It's just a beautifully structured sequence that forms the basis of all complex life.
Section 5. The Great Biological Divide.
Okay, let's compare these two survival tactics head to head. For asexual reproduction, you've got just one parent, no gametes involved, no fertilization. It results in identical clones, and it operates at super high speeds. Then for sexual reproduction, it requires two parents, it forms and fuses gametes, results in offspring that show tremendous variation, but it operates at a much slower pace. Taking a mental snapshot of this comparison is going to serve you incredibly well.
Section 6. Board Exam Quick Revision. Let's make sure this sticks. Speaking of serving you well, let's lock in these core concepts with an interactive, rapid-fire revision of the most common board exam questions. If you see this two-part question on your exam, remember our earlier discussion. Why is reproduction necessary? It ensures the continuation of a species and prevents them from going extinct. And which type produces variation? That is the partnership route, sexual reproduction, which mixes genetic material.
Next up, what are clones? Well, clones are the genetically identical offspring produced purely by asexual reproduction. And naturally, which type of reproduction is faster because it doesn't require finding a mate or complex fertilization? Asexual reproduction is by far the fastest multiplication method.
All right, here is your ultimate checklist for this part of the chapter. Can you define reproduction? Can you explain its importance to a species? Can you contrast asexual and sexual reproduction? Do you know what gametes are, how fertilization works, and what makes a clone? If you can confidently check off everything on this list, huge congratulations, because you have successfully mastered the foundation of Chapter 8.
We've seen the big picture of survival today, really understanding the why and the what of life's continuation. But exactly what mechanical tricks do single-celled organisms use to actually clone themselves? Like, how does an organism just literally split in half, or grow a completely new body from a severed piece? I'm going to leave you with that provocative thought. Join us for part 2 of this explainer, where we will uncover the fascinating world of fission, budding, and regeneration. Until then, keep learning and stay curious.